Is everyone ready to go? Okay, everyone, welcome. Tonight is our Traffic and Pedestrian Safety Committee meeting for January 8th, 2025. Happy New Year, everyone. It's 6:02 p.m. And we'll get started. If the chair would like to begin the Pledge of Allegiance. Next slide, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Next slide, please. I think we can begin roll call. Before actually I begin roll call, today Crystal Pasco could not make it, so I will mark her as absent for today. But Ben Doyle?
Present.
Faith Denham Sims?
Present.
Kent Moriarty?
I'm here.
And again, Crystal Pasco is absent. And for tonight, staff, it's me, Nazmia, Mia Hubner. And then next slide, please. Tonight it's a little different. I believe November's minutes couldn't be approved during December's meeting. So tonight we'd like to get approval for November 13th meeting minutes and December 11th meeting, 11th meeting minutes. So I'll start with November 13th. Would anybody like to make the first approval?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from the November 13th meeting.
Would anybody like to second, please?
Second.
Okay, run through the roll call. Ben Doyle?
Approve.
Faith Denham Sims?
Approve.
Kent Moriarty?
Approve.
Okay, so that's approval of November 13th, 2024 meeting minutes. Would anybody like to make a motion to approve December 11th meeting minutes?
I'll motion to approve the December meeting minutes.
Would anybody like to make a second, please?
Yes.
Okay. All right, I'll go through the roll call again. Member Ben Doyle
I'll abstain.
for December 11th?
Yeah, they look good, but I wasn't there, so if that's allowable, I would just not vote.
That's how we're supposed to abstain if we don't
Okay.
go to the meeting.
So
All
what do
right.
we do if we have unapproved minutes? They just sit out there until they're approved someday, or just?
I think so, just like November's couldn't be approved in December, so December's would go to January.
Okay, so would member Faith Denham Sims?
Abstain, I wasn't at the meeting.
Okay, abstain for. And member Kent Moriarty?
I can approve, but it doesn't matter, huh? So they'll never
Unfortunately, I
get-
think we would need, like you said, I think we would need multiple. I believe we can probably shelf the approval of the December 11th meeting until next meeting with Crystal Pasco.
So
Maybe
Chris-
that will have.
If Crystal's here, then still it would never get passed, right? Wouldn't you need a majority?
I believe so. Okay.
But wouldn't it be the majority of the people who were at the meeting?
I don't know. I don't think so. I think it's the majority of the quorum, isn't it?
Since I'll mark that we have two who have abstained, one who was approved and one who's absent. And then if we need to readdress these meeting minutes, then we can, but I'll double check what the requirement might be, whether these remain unapproved because of not enough, like a majority, or not. So I'll just keep December 11th. It's not approved today.
I wonder, that's the meeting where there wasn't a quorum, right? The December meeting. So maybe you can't approve the minutes for a meeting that didn't have a quorum. It was just a meeting and it was
Just to
recorded,
have the
but it
problem.
wasn't a meeting that was official because there was no quorum.
Okay, I'll see how we have to properly, for example, if there's a proper notation for it, maybe. And then I think in the next meeting on, what is it, February 12th, we can reintroduce what these meeting minutes for December 11th should be classified as. All right, next slide, please. This slide is to open the floor to our committee for any committee member reports and communications, whether they're reports, announcements, or any requests for future agenda items. I open the floor to the committee for any of these items. Okay, there's no new announcements today. Next slide, please. Now we can open the floor for citizens to be heard. Again, please remember that any items that any citizens would like to present, they should be items that aren't already on the agenda. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. If you're calling on Zoom, please be sure to raise your hand so we know to open the floor to you. And if you're here in person, please fill out a yellow card and bring it up to the front so we can introduce you up to the podium. Okay, I think we can move to the next slide, please. So this slide, item number 6, is meant to introduce the data that we've used for these traffic safety issues that will be presented in the next item. I believe 2 meetings ago, whether it was November, possibly, we discussed updates for 4 of our traffic safety issues. There's a general questions from the committee here regarding the data that was used that evening. So I wanted to present what that data was, what it came from, or at least its reliability. So the data that we use for the traffic analysis for the traffic issues that are presented from citizens or what we've had on our table, we use a data called Street Light Insight. So essentially, they are I don't know if it's fair to call them a company, but they're a source that uses what's called mobility data from connected devices. So as we mentioned before, we mentioned that they take data, for example, from cell phone users while they're in the car and they're driving. But it looks like that it's not just limited to those connected devices. It could be connected vehicles. So if they have services or basically online services that are connected to the car, that data is collected. There's commercial and personal GPS data that they use and collect. And they collect this data and pretty much contextualize it to traffic and transportation related context. And so what it does is, once they have that conceptualized, they've pretty much validated it against thousands of other permanent traffic counters or other traffic surveys that have been performed through cities throughout the U.S. They are described on their website as being trusted by thousands of transportation professionals across the U.S. and Canada, and they validate against thousands of permanent traffic counters. Their processing engine transforms billions of data points into contextualized travel patterns. And again, these data are collected from either commercial or personal devices, and they test it against, again, other, I would say, traditionally captured information during surveys or counters and what have you. And they've found that when you compare their data to the traditional data, they have a coefficient of determination of 0.98 or 98%. So what that means is when you measure the coefficient of determination, you're basically laying down like, okay, how well does this model fit, another model or another formula. And so typically your coefficient of determination, or R squared, is going to be something between 0 and 1. So if it's 0, that means it doesn't fit at all. There's no fit, no connection. If you get a coefficient of determination of 1, then that means it's a perfect exact fit. And in this case, they found that their coefficient is 0.98. So it's pretty darn close to perfect. So it has a very reliable track record, I should say. And it's something that's used. We tried to put some other trusted organizations on the slide of who also uses this, not just in the way that we're using it during TAPS, but they'll use it for example, like transportation modeling or planning and active transportation plans and things like that. So per this company's website, we have local agencies like City of San Jose, Los Angeles Department of Transportation, I think City of Concord. There's a lot of close by organizations, including Caltrans. So if you were looking at government organizations that use it, there's a lot of lateral organizations to us that use it. And then of course there's private companies like Kimley and Horn and ACOM, who are civil engineering firms, also using it. And they have a long, broad list that you can check out on their website. Again, all the imagery and points made on this slide were pulled from the company's website, which I've listed at the bottom underneath the graph there, www.streetlightdata.com. And you could see more information of, how the data can be used and who uses it. And I believe it was Chair Faith Dunham Sims. I think you asked whether, how does it compare to some of City of Pinole's surveys? So I used this platform to compare to a recent traffic transportation study survey that we did in 2024. I think it was presented and accepted by City Council sometime in November. And when I compared their data to that survey, almost all points were within 1 to 2 miles per hour. So after doing that little side-by-side, the data appears to be pretty reliable. So I just wanted to open this up to you guys before we go into the next few slides, where we'll bring up again I think we had 4 locations, and we'll offer our recommendations and what the data says for that. But we wanted to make sure that some of your questions were answered as far as, the data and the data's background. Okay.
I had a couple of, I think there were 2 things we were confused about before. One was we wondered what it meant, average speed, because for the different segments it said average speed, and we didn't know what that meant exactly. It sounds like that means that's the 50th percentile speed. So they're saying if an average speed is 20 miles an hour, that means that half of the cars are going 20 miles an hour or less, and half of the cars are going above that speed. That's what I understand average speed to be. Correct?
No, and the way so average speed, I think they took basically all the data points that happened on that road. So, for example, I think most of these segments that I'll show you, I think they had like 100,000 travel, like actual travels on that road. And so each one of those travelers, say they're going 20, 25, 27, say you had, you know, as usual, say you had like, you would pretty much add up all of their speeds and divide it by the number of travelers. And so like that's the literal average of the entire data scope.
Yeah, I don't think we're saying different things. Can you jump ahead?
Yeah,
Even,
we'll go to the next and then
well, no, just jump ahead to this slide, just so we could just talk about,
Okay.
and then we could go back. But this was kind of helpful to me.
Okay, yeah.
Can you? Oh, we can't.
We'll get to, I think we can move forward normally I think we'll get to it and we can
Okay,
reintroduce
I
that
just
topic.
wanted to
Yeah.
clarify, because this is the slide where we're talking about what's this data mean?
Okay.
This one, right? Or the one
Yeah,
before?
so this slide, it will be mainly on where the data comes from, the slide that we just passed right now, where the data comes from and its reliability. And then when we go to the next few slides regarding like what you're mentioning, we can go over what the numbers on there mean.
Okay, because because our two questions weren't so much about reliability, but were about what average means and the speed for a segment versus the speed for a point.
Okay,
So
yeah.
whenever we get to the best slide to talk about that.
Okay, we can start with the first one. But next slide, please. We're on item number 7, traffic and pedestrian safety issues. This slide today is very important, traffic calming policy. Please visit the website that is listed on the side at the slide, pinole.gov/engineering/administration/traffic calming policy. This is important not in the sense of just seeing, because the policy, I think we've been presenting it so far as a list of action items. But when you go onto the website, there is a document that you can download, which is the entire policy. I have one just here, just for reference. It's a pretty thick book. And so it not only contains what our steps are expected to be when we're trying to implement traffic calming, but there's the actual devices that you can use, whether it's a speed hump or high visibility crosswalks or roundabouts or something. So each one of those actually has its own set of criteria as well, beyond just what we've been describing in our policy steps. So we'll get into that too. We've used that to kind of contextualize our public works, basically our recommendations. So if anyone hasn't read that or introduced themselves to that yet, I would highly recommend doing so, because it will contextualize a lot more. Next slide, please. So we're on item number 7B, which are the traffic issues submitted by citizens. This is where we'll go back to some of the segments we discussed before, apply the data to it. We'll discuss, what the data might mean, and then what our recommendations are based off of the data and our traffic calming policy. Next slide, please. We just want to remind before, again, that we go into these separate issues, that we are maintaining a list of the traffic issues that have been discussed and their status. You can visit the website on this slide to find that list. Because before, I think we had a long running table on the slides, whether the items were cleared or not. So we have it in one spot to find it all and have a cleaner PowerPoint presentation. Next slide, please. So we'll start off with item number 5 from our table. The original request was that on Nob Hill Avenue, basically between Appian Way to Meadow Park, there were concerns about speeding. Next slide, please. So we've applied the Streetlight Insight platform to analyze this street segment. So to properly define the data, we've taken data from January 1st, 2023 through August 31st, 2024. You'll find that a lot of these issues, we've got that time period because those were the time periods that these items were presented and introduced to us. For the traffic calming policy, we need to post or understand that the expected speed limit for that segment is 25 miles per hour. And the person who introduced this segment, they were wanting to know basically from Nob Hill Avenue to Meadow Park. This is analysis between Rogers Way and Appian Way, so our segments are isolated between that. If we go to the next slide, please. We've tried to pretty much isolate each of the segments as presented from the data platform. So they don't just take the speeds that are happening through a long stretch. They divide the streets into segments that are appropriately separated. So there's either a visual interest or there's an actual physical something there that's changing the behavior per segment. And so in this case we've isolated 5 segments. I'll have a slide after this that has kind of everything spelled out of what the segment numbers are, what streets they're in between, and then all of their speed data that's associated with that. So this is a visual to help anybody who's looking at the table on the next slide and doesn't understand where it's applied. So as you notice on this slide,
Can you go back to that one,
yeah, okay.
the previous one?
So on this one,
Yeah, that's helpful,
okay,
because we were confused last time about what does average speed mean. So, for instance, segment 6, it shows the 85th percentile speed, which is the important number for how speed limits are set. So the 85th percentile, in this case, for that segment, 30% of the, or 85% of the cars go 30 miles an hour or less, and 15% of the cars go over that. And then it goes down 70, 65. And so the average speed, 22 miles an hour, it doesn't show it. But what I imagine that means is that average 22 miles an hour is the 50th percentile speed, meaning that half the cars go 22 miles an hour or less, and half the cars go over 22 miles an hour. That's what I interpret that to mean. Is that correct? So when
not necessarily. I would have to check because I did have all the percentiles basically in 10% intervals, and it's possible. I mean, I could overlook, but to me, the average is the literal average. So it's basically the sum of all points divided by the number of points.
That'd be interesting to know, because the way it looks there, it looks like all those averages would be the 50th percentile speeds.
And
That's a type of average.
Yeah.
It's not the mean. It's what kind of average is that?
the median.
Median?
Yeah.
So I guess our question is that average speed mean the mean or the median? Is it the 50th? Is it the mean, or is it the 50th percentile speed?
So the average is going to be the mean. So it's not necessarily the 50th percentile.
Average could be the median, because there's 3 different types
A
of
median
means.
means what is the center point between the number of data points. So if you have 21 data points, the median is like the 10th. So it's what's happening in between a set of data points. Average means the literal sum over the number of
So like
parts.
one car going 500 miles an hour to that segment wouldn't throw the median off a lot.
Yeah,
But it would throw the mean average off
Yeah.
a lot.
Yeah, so it would throw off, if you have somebody going 500 miles an hour, it would throw off, it would raise the average to geared towards that number, but the median doesn't change because that's just
Right.
a center point of all of what's happening.
but mean and median are both different types of averages. So when it says average here, it doesn't necessarily mean mean. It just means one type of average, and it's not telling us if it's a mean or a median. So that's
Yeah.
what I guess we are still unclear about.
Yeah, I think a median is not meant to be associated with an average.
A median is a type of average.
Let me just see if I can pull up a definition, if that helps. Median. Okay, so then this, I'm just Googling to help out. So a median is defined as denoting or relating to a value or quantity lying at the midpoint of a frequency distribution of observed values or quantities. So you'll have, like I said, a list of quantities or points or whatever it is you're measuring, and the median is literally just the item or the point that's in the middle of the distribution, okay? And
Right.
then,
And that could be what this is.
no, it's just, it's the average.
No, but a median is a type of average. So when you say average, it's not telling you if it's a mean or a median. Average is a more generic term. And mean and median are specific types of averages. So that word average isn't enough for us to know what type of average it's talking about.
So in this case, the average is meant to be the mean average of a data set, which is found by adding all the numbers in the data set and then dividing by the number of values in the set. So the idea is, if you have people, like a lot of people going really slow, it'll drop that average.
I
If you
underst-
have people who are really speeding, they would raise that average. So it
I
includes-
understand what a mean is, and I understand what a median is. They're both different types of averages. So when it says average here, that's not enough information for us to know if it's a mean or a median.
Okay,
So
I will just say, I guess for this, let's interchange the average with mean.
We can't do that. I think this is a 50th percentile speed. So I don't think we should assume that till we know.
Yeah, I'll check if there's a correlation between those two for the 50%, 50th percentile. But I can check if that correlates.
Yeah, and I had one other thing we weren't sure about last time. We talked about it for a while. When you're using the 85th percentile speed to determine a speed limit, it's the speed of cars going over a certain point. So you're using the old-fashioned, the counters. So it's and you talked about this a lot last time. It's the speed over a point. But for this, if a car, say, is on segment 6, and the average speed is 22 miles an hour, it's, let me back up. If this software is saying that a car's speed is X over that segment, it's taking an average over that segment versus the speed at a certain point. So the smaller the segments are, the better, because it's possible if a segment's too big, a car could be going really fast and slow down for a dip and then go really fast again. And the average would be lower than if you had taken the speed at a point where the car was actually traveling faster. So I don't know, I wonder if you could use this data for the 85th percentile speed, because it's not measuring the speed at a point, it's measuring the speed over at an average over a distance, yeah.
Yeah, so essentially the percentiles are meant to show, okay, 65% of people are driving 24 miles per hour or less. 70th percentile is 26 miles per hour or less, and 85th percentile, they're going 29 miles per hour or less. Oh, I was reading segment 7. By the way.
Yeah.
So it also paints a picture, like once you jump to the next percentile, okay, how much are they really going? So I didn't want it to be confused that 85% of people are going 29% or 20 miles per hour, or, without noting that it is or less. So they're definitely saying that 85% of people are going, they're not going above that 29 miles per hour. So I don't want it to be confused that it's saying like 85% of people are going 29 miles per hour. They're going that as a maximum or less. And so when you jump down to the 70th, you notice that they're going 26. So, there's a small bracket of people who increase a little bit past that 70th. So I think we should just keep that in mind. But for this segment, or this street, I should say, on Nob Hill, segment number 5 is the furthest segment to the left. And they have a average daily traffic of drivers of 204 vehicles. Their average speed in this segment is 19 miles per hour. The 65th percentile is 21 miles per hour. 70th percentile is 22 miles per hour. And then the 85th percentile is 24 miles per hour. Would you guys prefer me to read the numbers for each segment? Or is the visual on that?
No, you don't need to.
Okay.
This is helpful, though, because last time we didn't see these percentiles. Basically,
Yeah.
this is showing us a distribution of the speeds, and that's what we were asking for. So that helps. So I guess whenever we present this information from the software, if we show the percentiles, which show how the speeds are distributed rather than just one number, that helps a lot.
Yeah, so I think it paints a broader picture of how the majority of people are behaving. So it also is important to note the reason we use the 65th and 70th percentile here is because our traffic policy directly mentions those percentages as a means to make a judgment. And I'll show you that in the next slide. Next slide, please. The table there is basically just to wrap up all the numbers together, as opposed to seeing the visual from before. So the city's recommendation for this section of Nob Hill, that a traffic calming device is not warranted, and that they're not driving, the majority of people are not driving significantly over the speed limit. And so those that are outliers, which should be captured by other means like enforcement or like those meters that the police put out, what they're called, the traffic meters that show everyone's speed. So per the traffic calming policy, almost every single traffic calming measure or device asks that a speed survey or data must demonstrate that at least 67% of the motorists exceed the 25 mile per hour speed limit. And so the reason we put the 65th and the 70th percentile, because obviously 67% falls in between there. And we find that pretty much the majority of those people within that percentage are driving at the speed limit or not significantly above. So in the case of this Nob Hill one, when they do exceed it, it's like maybe 1 mile per hour above when we're looking at the 67th percentile. Another requirement in the traffic calming policy is that the average daily traffic volume must be approximately 1,500 vehicles per 24-hour period, or 150 vehicles per hour total in both directions on an average weekday. So we've included on this table and in the picture before, the AADT was meant to stand for average daily segment traffic. And you'll notice that the numbers are well below 1,500 vehicles per day. The max is out maybe around 600 vehicles per day right at the intersection of Appian Way to the segment that goes to Second Avenue. So with those criteria in mind, 67% of the drivers are at the speed limit, and the average daily traffic volume doesn't approach or exceed 1,500 vehicles, and therefore the city's recommendation is that a traffic calming device is not warranted and that outliers should be captured with enforcement.
That's really helpful. I never knew that about the 67% and the 1,500 vehicles. I guess if I lived on a street that didn't have a high volume, that didn't have 1,500 vehicles, but still had very fast drivers, I would still feel like traffic calming was warranted. I guess it is what it is, but it makes sense about the 67% percentile, that if drivers aren't going fast, you don't need traffic calming. But it seems like volume and speed are two different things. And even if you had lower volume, if you had really high speeds, that's dangerous. So it seems like you couldn't write off the need for traffic calming just because there was low volume, but
Yeah,
that's a
it would be
separate
different
thing.
if it was low volume and you could see that the behavior of that low volume is extreme, then of course I think that's a different conversation. But for this case, the volume is low and the speeds are not excessive, to the point of significance, I believe. So that's our opinion, or our recommendation, I should say. But with that, we can move to the next item unless there's comments or anything from that. Okay, for the slide number, or we're on item number 7C. This is for the table number item 17. The original request was about speeding on Tennant Avenue. There was a request to add speed bumps near Fernandez Park. Next slide, please. Again, this is just to define the scenario here. When we got the data, we took it from the period of January 1st, 2023 to August 31st, 2024. Again, the understood speed limit at that location is 25 miles per hour. Again, this is for an analysis of Tennant Avenue, quote unquote, by Fernandez Park. And it's an analysis between Orleans Drive through San Pablo Avenue. Next slide, please. Again, we wanted to create a graphic to help visualize what the data is broken down into. We've got it divided into 4 segments. Again, each box is listed where the average daily traffic is listed per box, the average speed, and the 65th through 85th percentile is also listed. There is also a general behavior of at least the 70% or less that are driving under the speed limit or exactly the speed limit. There's only, even for the 85th percentile for the majority of these segments, there's still maybe 2 miles per hour above the speed limit, but anyone that has driven more than that, they're again an outlier. But the general behavior is about the speed limit or less. Next slide, please. Again, this table is to more closely show the distribution of their numbers. Per segment, all the segments are defined between what cross streets they are and what segments they are. Again, the city's recommendation is that a traffic calming device is not warranted, or a speed bump is not warranted. Capture the outliers with enforcement. Again, this is another case where 67% of the drivers are at the speed limit or less, and the average daily traffic volume doesn't approach or exceed 1,500 vehicles. To clarify, there is one segment that shows 1,500 plus vehicles, but it is not the segment next to the park, which is what was the original point of interest. It looks like people might drive up or park next to the businesses that are at the face of San Pablo and then stop. They didn't continue as much down the street toward the park locations. Yeah, so that is the city's recommendation, again, per the traffic calming policy. All the items aren't met to add that. Okay, next item, please. Again, we're on item number 7C. This is the item number 20 of our table. Again, the original request was for an installation of stop markings or crosswalks along Ramona between Lucas Avenue and Santa Barbara Drive, plus speed enforcement. Next slide, please. This table, the image is for specifically those streets between Santa Barbara Drive and Lucas. You'll notice it's two segments. Again, the data periods we drew from were from January 1st, 2023 to August 31st, 2024. The understood speed limit in that location is 25 miles per hour. And the analysis is on Ramona Street between Lucas Avenue through Santa Barbara Drive. Next slide, please. For these two segments, they're labeled segment 3 and segment 4. The average daily traffic volume through those two locations, they are 496 in segment 3 and 379 for segment 4. Again, their average speed is under 25 miles per hour, and the segment 3 is also very close to 25 miles per hour or less through the 85th percentile. And the segment between Santa Barbara and Carmelita Way are between 27 and 31, which might be more because of a downhill kind of movement of the street.
But before you switch,
Yeah, please.
so say the speed limit is 20, for segment 4, the speed limit's 25 miles an hour, right?
Yes.
So that's saying the 65th percentile, 35% of the cars are traveling at 27 miles an hour or more. So a little under half the cars are traveling above the speed limit, roughly. It looks like the 50th percentile is 24 miles an hour, so 24, 25. So basically half
feels like
the traffic is below the speed limit and half the traffic is above the speed limit.
I would have to double check.
Well, I mean, it basically says that.
But,
It
yeah.
just is, so maybe it's not enough to do any kind of traffic calming, but it seems like it's kind of on the edge. Like basically half the people are exceeding the speed limit, or a little less than half are exceeding the speed limit. If the speed limit's 25, a little less than half of the people that drive on that road are exceeding the speed limit.
Okay. Yeah, I think I see what you're saying in the sense that even though it's a couple miles per hour or so above, it's starting to approach that kind of border of, it's not as easy as the other segments from the past projects, I should say, the past items that we just discussed, where they're obviously at 25 or less. This one, there is, it's approaching a little bit more, but again, I think it was because I think that area is starting to go a little downhill. I don't have an explanation necessarily for that segment, but if we go to the next slide, the Public Works is also recommending that traffic calming devices being built aren't necessarily warranted for that raise in the miles per hour, but we think that that could be captured with enforcement.
Yeah, I agree with the conclusion, but for the second zone,
You want to see the image?
No, it's okay. It shows the 65th percentile speed is 27. So the 67th percentile is over the speed limit. So there's that one condition that 67% of the drivers are at or near the speed limit. But in this case, the 67th percentile is over the speed limit. So that condition's not satisfied for, you're relying on the volume, the 1,500.
Well,
volume
it's
for
the
that.
volume and also the significance of I don't think that part is defined, like how much more exceeding 25 miles per hour is required, but the significance of it, like, is a, $20,000 speed hump going to warrant slowing people down 1 mile or 2 miles
I
per
know.
hour, for example?
But one of the conditions is it says 67% of drivers are at or near the speed limit. But in this case,
For this segment.
67% of the drivers are above the speed limit.
Yeah,
Between 27 and 28.
yeah, I can
It's
see.
near, but it's
It's creeping there.
creeping up.
Yeah, and it's kind of a combination of these items too. I mean, if there's ever a discrepancy or anyone disagrees, they can go through the other criteria or steps to try and to do that, other kind of device or traffic calming or device, if you want to call it that, or methodology. But it's just, as we are now, as close as it is, it doesn't satisfy other criteria. We would have to check, for example, and this is an issue on one of the later items, you have to check things like the grade of the street, if it exceeds a certain amount, and I'm wondering if there's that, and then there's also certain steps where you have to get approval from your emergency personnel, so firefighters, police, paramedics, all that kind of stuff. So I think in this case, if it were a lot more significant, then I think it's a cause for implementing something. But in this case, like we said, it's so much on the border, I think it leaves it open to that kind of discussion.
So their original ask is for stop markings and crosswalks, and I just did a quick Google look, and there are no stop signs at those intersections. So couldn't a compromise be to paint crosswalks? Because it would at least, catch drivers' attention, hopefully, to slow down and pay attention to pedestrians, because I'm guessing that's, if they specifically ask for crosswalks, that there's people trying to cross the streets there. So regardless of what the data says, could that not be a compromise and a relatively inexpensive mitigation, to help at least,
Yeah.
is to put paint down on the street?
Yeah, I can see that, but unfortunately, the traffic calming policy also answers that for higher visibility crosswalks. It also says the guidelines, City Council may consider the installation of higher visibility crosswalks if the criteria listed below are satisfied. And there's 3 criteria. The speed limit survey thing, about 67% of the motorists exceed 25 miles per hour. The street must have no more than 2 traffic lanes, 1 traffic lane in each direction for 2-way streets, or 1 traffic lane for 1-way streets. And number 3, the average traffic volume must be greater than 1,500 vehicles per 24-hour period. So it doesn't necessarily, it might check off the box for the 25 mile per hour thing, and maybe the 2-way traffic, but it doesn't have the volume. And so it would then fall onto council consideration. And so if that's the mode you would like to travel, then towards still doing the crosswalk markings, then that's something that I think would need to go into the next few steps, and then presented to council. Because I think having, for example, if you're going to introduce a stop, I think that creates a whole other set of criteria. But crosswalks potentially might be something that you can get approved from council. I can't speak for them, but it would have to be a recommendation from you guys as a committee or the neighborhood at large.
It just seems to me at this point, it's a switch from traffic calming to pedestrian safety. And at every intersection, whether or not there are crosswalks present, it is a legal crossing for pedestrians. So to me, just, regardless of what the criteria says, laying paint down in the street at some place where if it was newer construction, the likelihood is paint would have been, laid down. Then if we need to go to the council from that standpoint, I would think we should not back down from that, because of the statistics. Getting a stop sign installed is a whole nother
Yeah,
of
that's all,
fish.
but if it's crosswalk.
Right, but it seems like putting paint down at a legal crossing intersection, at an intersection is reasonable.
Okay. Without verifying the steps, I want to say, I'm not sure if the committee needs to present that to council or we as the staff present on your behalf. I honestly, I'm not sure about that. I know we have a council or committee training coming up soon, so I would recommend we probably facilitate for the training and see what the proper next step would have been in this case. Admittedly, I think you can proceed accordingly, for making that recommendation. I'm just not sure 100% of how that steps follow.
I think it could happen either way. In the past, typically, it's happened worse. It has not happened very often, but when this group has made a recommendation, it's been staff made the recommendation to council, but it could be this group.
Okay. I think it's best to probably just confirm the procedural part, but I think as a committee, you can act or proceed accordingly to what your recommendations are. And so if we want to present crosswalk markings for that area, I think that we can certainly proceed to have that way with council.
So I believe the training will occur prior to our next meeting, so maybe this could go on an agenda item.
Okay.
That we could hash it out then.
Would you guys like to make a motion to add it to the agenda or just
If we need to, I will make a motion that how do we even want to phrase this? Discussing putting crosswalk markings
item number 20?
for SI number 20.
Okay. And then would anybody like to second?
I'll second.
Okay, so we'll go through the roll call. Member Doyle?
Aye.
Member Faith Dunham Sims?
Aye.
Member Moriarty?
Approve. Before we go on, and since we're already talking about future agenda items, I don't think this needs a vote or anything. But there's some confusion about percentile speeds. And I know the 85th percentile speed is a really important speed because it's used to determine what speed limits are. And that's why cities do these studies to determine speed limits. And typically, I think you round up to the nearest
5 miles.
5 miles an hour, and that's what the speed limit is, unless the city engineer has some latitude to decrease it by 5 miles an hour. So in some of these cases, the 85th percentile speed is 31 miles an hour. So I guess that the speed limit should be increased to 30, unless the city engineer, and probably that's happened, the city engineer
Keep it not that.
dialed it down by 5. But I wonder if maybe we could just have a little mini presentation from staff on what percentile speeds mean and why they're significant and how speed limits are based on them. I think, is it every year that the city has a study done by some outside consultant and the council?
I think the traffic studies, if I'm remembering correctly, they're meant to be done, I think, every 7 years. If I'm not mistaken, there's basically a bracket of years that the traffic study is meant to hold for, and then you have to do another one. So I want to say the last one was about 7 or 8 years ago, so I think
Okay.
it fits.
Yeah, if we could get just a little mini educational presentation so we feel more, better understanding of all that.
Okay. All right, so I've taken note of that. Next slide, please. This is item number 23. The original request was for a speed bump installation at 2467 Calusa Street near light pole number 351. Next slide, please. Again, we've taken the data periods from January 1st, 2023 through August 31st, 2024. The understood speed limit in this area is 25 miles per hour as it's residential. Again, the analysis is for Calusa Street, which is an analysis for speed bump installation at or near 2467 Calusa Street. And in this case, this street was a segment of its own, so there's only one segment. Next slide, please. So it's only one set of information here. The average daily traffic volume in this location is actually quite low. It's about 29. It's less than 100 vehicles a day. The average speed has been found to be 19 miles per hour, with the 85th percentile being at the 25 miles per hour expected speed limit. If we go to the next slide, please. This table's a lot smaller than the rest of them. So you'll notice the traffic volume, the average speed, the 65th, 70th, and 85th percentile speeds are marked there. Again, the city's recommendation, or the Public Works recommendation, is that a traffic calming device, aka the speed bump request, is not warranted. If there are people speeding and there are outliers, they should be captured by enforcement or other measures. And per the traffic calming policy, again, 67% of drivers on this street are easily at or below the speed limit. Again, the daily traffic volume is very low and doesn't approach or exceed 1,500 vehicles. This one, since it was a speed bump that was requested, there's one of the additional criteria is that the street must have a sustained longitudinal grade of 6% or less. Exceptions may be allowed for steeper street grades where the steeper grades prevail over relatively short distances. For instance, grades up to 8% may be acceptable for up to 400 feet, and grades up to 10 may be acceptable for up to 200 feet. And in this case, I believe there was not that criteria for the length as well as the grades. That street is the grade's pretty steep on that street, and the longitudinal grade of the road exceeds 6%. So for those three reasons, again, the Public Works recommends no traffic calming device or speed bump to be installed, and that any outliers be captured by enforcement or prevention. Okay. With that, we can move to the next slide, please. We're here on item number 7D. Issues related to Caltrans right-of-way, of course, if there are any locations or issues that you find in the Caltrans right-of-way, which, for example, can be intersections that are for the on-ramps or off-ramps of freeways, for example, you can report these Caltrans issues to the website listed on the slide, which is https://csr.dot.ca.gov. Next slide, please. We're at item number 8, I should say, for any staff updates. Next slide, please. We don't have any new updates for development projects, but there's our website on this page that regularly puts in new development project information and their phases of construction or the phase that they're in as far as getting their projects going. Next slide, please. Item number 8B is the slide for active transportation plan. Again, we recommend going to walkandrollpinole.com to be up to speed on anything related to the active transportation plan. Our draft status, again, is that the draft is complete and it's been distributed for comments. Per our last draft discussion meeting, the deadline for comments, they've extended the submission for comments to January 16th, 2025. So you have some time, a little bit more time left if you want to submit any comments to us for the active transportation plan. Next slide, please. This is item number 9, maintenance service request. Again, if there's any maintenance or service requests that you would like to make to the city, you can contact us via email at pwservicerequests@pinole.gov, or you can visit our website at pinole.gov. You would check out services and contact us, and there should be a link to report a problem. Next slide, please. Item number 10, we've got our TAPS committee contacts. So our friendly committee members here tonight, these are their email addresses if you have anything that you need to report to them or need their contact information for comments or what have you. All right, and our next slide, please. Item number 11, would the chair like to adjourn to the next meeting?
We'll adjourn this meeting until February 12th, 2025 at 6 p.m. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good night.